Hey guys, welcome back to Fiction Flux. Hope you're all doing well. Now let's get into it. The first time Dabi saw her, she was crying over a textbook. Not the dramatic kind of crying, not the loud falling apart kind that people performed when they wanted someone to notice. The quiet kind. The kind where the tears just fell and she kept working anyway, kept writing in her notebook with the pen moving steady, even while her face was doing something entirely different. He had been on the roof of the building across from the library for 40 minutes. Waiting for someone who was late. He was used to waiting. Waiting was most of what the League was. Waiting for Shigaraki to stop talking about video games long enough to give operational direction. Waiting for Kurogiri to open the right warp. Waiting for the plan to become a real plan instead of a collection of grievances pointed at a general direction. He was good at waiting. He was less good at not noticing the girl crying quietly over a textbook in the library across the street. He noticed her the way he noticed fire. Not because she was fire, because she was the specific opposite of everything around her, the late-night library full of students doing the performance of studying, phones out, conversation happening, the general atmosphere of people who were present in body only, and she was there actually working, actually fighting with whatever was in the textbook, actually feeling things about it. Actually here. He watched her wipe her face with her sleeve without stopping the pen. He thought, that's someone who doesn't have the option of not caring. He thought, I know what that looks like from the inside. He had been inside it for years. Someone appeared behind him and said something about the contact being delayed, and he turned away from the window and did the operational thing and did not think about the library. He did not think about it for approximately 6 hours. Then he thought about it. Okay, we need to go back further than that. Because you can't understand what happened between Dabi and Izumi Midoriya without understanding what Dabi actually was underneath the fire and the stitches and the everything is already burned quality he wore like a second skin. And what he was underneath all of that is the most important and least comfortable part of this whole story. So let's go back. All the way back. To a boy named Toya. Toya Todoroki was born wrong. Not in the way the world eventually decided he was wrong, the villain way, the criminal way, the string of crimes and fires and faces that stared out of wanted posters with a specific quality of having decided something that made people uncomfortable. He was born wrong for his father's plans. That was the specific wrongness, the operational wrongness. Endeavor had been building towards something since before Toya existed, the project of the perfect successor, the child who would have both ice and fire, who would surpass all might in Endeavor's place since Endeavor had failed to do it himself. Toya was the first attempt. Toya had fire. The wrong kind, his body ran too hot for the power it produced. The fire exceeded the containment capacity of the biology. He burned himself just by being what he was. Endeavor had looked at this problem and made a decision. The decision was, this one doesn't work, move on to the next attempt. He had been 7 years old. He had not understood all of it at 7. He had understood the specific texture of being looked at and found insufficient, of being the starting point of a project that was now moving past him, of the door that had been open, the door of being the one, the chosen one, the purpose, closing. He had done what children did when the door closed. He had tried to reopen it. Harder training, more output, pushing the fire past what his body could safely hold, showing Endeavor what he could do even at the cost of what it did to him. He had understood at some level that the cost was real and had made the calculation that the cost was worth it if the door opened. The door did not open. His mother had tried to stop the training. His father had not. And Toya had burned. Not metaphorically, actually burned. The temperature he generated exceeded what his body was designed for, and the result was what fire always produced in things that could not contain it. He had been 13. Everyone had believed he was dead. He had not been dead. He had been in enough pain that dead would have been simpler, and had survived anyway with the specific stubborn wrongness of someone who had not been given permission to stop yet. He had survived into Dabi. Not a transition, not a transformation, more like a fire that had burned through everything combustible and found what was left after. What was left after was not Toya. Toya was the name of the boy who had wanted the door to open, who had kept trying, who had burned himself for a project that had already moved past him. What was left was the fire that had been told it was wrong. Dabi was the fire that had decided the house deserved to burn. That was the story he had been living in for almost a decade. The revenge story, the Todoroki story rewritten from inside the wound. All of his father's ambition turned back on itself, the project that had discarded him being dismantled from the outside. It was a real story. The grievance was real, everything he was angry about was real. He just had not examined, very carefully, what came after the burning. The second time he saw her was not the library. It was a street in Musutafu at 7 in the morning where he was doing reconnaissance, and she was doing whatever the opposite of reconnaissance was, moving through the street completely visible, completely herself, stopping to write in her notebook when something occurred to her, apologizing when she bumped into a lamppost, eating a piece of bread she had clearly bought from the bakery she had just passed, and was eating while walking because she had not stopped to eat before leaving wherever she came from. He was on the other side of the street. She walked past him. She did not notice him. This was notable because most people noticed him. The stitches and the burns and the specific quality of his presence tended to register in people before most things registered. She was in her notebook. He said nothing. He watched her walk away. He thought she's a UA student, the uniform, the notebook, the entrance exam anomaly, highest rescue points in recorded history, one for all. He thought she's the successor, the person All Might chose. He thought that should make her the opposite of interesting. He thought about the library window. He thought about the pen moving while her face did something different. He thought she doesn't have the option of not caring. He scratched the back of his neck, one of the stitched parts, where the sensation was specific and real in a way that other things weren't always real anymore. He kept walking. He did not circle back. He thought about it the whole afternoon. The third time was the one that changed things. He had been following a different target, completely unrelated to her, completely operational, the specific focused attention of someone doing a job. He was 3 blocks from the target's location when he heard something. Not a fight, not the sound of a quirk activating, something smaller. Someone saying, "I know it's a lot, but you're still standing." He stopped. He looked. She was sitting on the steps of a building with a boy he didn't immediately recognize, first year, UA, the visible signs of someone who had just come through something difficult. The specific posture of a person who had been holding themselves together and had just reached the moment where holding together required more than they had left. She was not performing comfort. That was the thing he noticed. He had seen people perform comfort before, the specific managed kindness of people who felt they should be helping and were producing the shape of help without the substance. She was not doing that. She was sitting on the step next to him, and she was present in the specific way that was rarer than people understood, not saying the right things, not doing the therapeutic thing, just there, entirely there. She said, "You don't have to be okay yet, that's not the requirement." The boy said something he couldn't hear. She said, "The requirement is just to still be here. You're still here, that's the whole thing right now." He stood on the pavement across the street and felt something move through him that was not fire. Not the comfortable warm thing, the uncomfortable thing, the thing that happened when something external contacted something internal that had been sealed off for a long time, and the contact felt like pressure against the seal. She had not noticed him. He walked away. He completed the reconnaissance. He went back to the bar and he sat in his corner, and Toga said something to him, and he didn't process what she said. Compress said, "You're quiet." He said, "I'm always quiet." Compress said, "You're a different kind of quiet." He said, "Drop it." Compress dropped it. He sat in his corner and thought about, the requirement is just to still be here. He had been here for almost a decade after the fire, specifically, deliberately, pointedly here, building toward the specific goal of dismantling the Todoroki project from outside the family it had consumed. He had never thought about the here as the thing. He had always thought about the goal as the thing. He thought those are different things. He thought about that for a long time. He did not write it down. He was not someone who wrote things down. He had seen her write things down and understood the function of it and had no equivalent system. He had fire. Fire was its own kind of processing. He sat in the bar and let the fire do what fire did with things it encountered. He thought, I have been burning towards something for a decade, and I have not examined what is left when the burning reaches it. He thought the rubble question. He had not heard that phrase. He would hear it later from her in a different context. But the thing the phrase pointed at, what you built versus what you burned, he was touching the edge of it in the bar without the words for it yet. He sat with it. He found her on purpose the fourth time. Not strategically, not operationally. He had been honest with himself about that, which was itself unusual. He was going to talk to her because he wanted to talk to her, and the want was specific and real, and he was not going to pretend it was something with a cleaner justification. She was in the park. He had looked for the library first, then the street where he had seen her with the bread, then the park, which he had identified from the pattern of the previous sightings as the most probable location for Thursday afternoon. She was on a bench. Notebook open, pen moving at the specific speed he would later learn was the analysis speed rather than the processing speed. He sat on the bench. Not close, a distance that was not quite 2 meters but close to it, the specific distance of someone who was present but not imposing. She did not look up. She said, "You've been watching me." He said, "Yes." She said, 3 times before today. He said, "Yes." She said, "Library, street, building steps." He said, "You noticed." She said, "I noticed things, I just kept writing." He said, "Why?" She looked up. Green eyes, the same ones from the library window. Up close they had the specific quality of eyes that registered what they looked at fully before they did anything else with the registration. She said, "Because you weren't a threat in any of those contexts, and because people who watch without approaching are usually working something out." He said, "What was I working out?" She said, "I don't know, you're the one who knows what you were working out." He said, "I was working out whether to come talk to you." She said, "And?" He said, "And I came." She said, "Yes." She looked at him. She said, "Dabi." He said, "Yes." She said, "The League of Villains." He said, "Yes." She said, "You're not here operationally." He said, "No." She said, "How do you know I won't?" He said, "Because you're still talking to me." She said, "Yes." She said, "I am still talking to you." She looked at her notebook. She said, "Why did you come?" He thought about the library and the pen moving while her face did something different. He thought about the street and the bread. He thought about the step outside the building, and the requirement is just to still be here. He said, "Because you said something I needed to hear, and you weren't saying it to me, and I found myself wanting to hear what you'd say if you were." She looked at him. She said, "What did I say?" He said, "The step, the kid." She said, "You heard that?" He said, "Yes." She said, "The requirement is just to still be here." He said, "Yes." She said, "That's what you needed to hear." He said, "Yes." She was quiet. She wrote something in the notebook. He said, "What are you writing?" She said that you've been here for a long time after something that should have ended things, and that you came to a park to talk to someone because they said something real and you needed real. She said, "Is that accurate?" He said, "Uncomfortably." She said, "Most accurate things are uncomfortable." He said, "You write fast." She said, "Analysis speed, processing speed is different." He said, "How many notebooks?" She said, 28, 29 by end of week probably. He said, "About what?" She said, "Everything, hero analysis, structural critique, the gap between what systems claim to be and what they actually are." He said, "And people?" She said, "And people, yes." He said, "Am I in a notebook now?" She said, "You've been in one since the library." He said, "What does it say?" She said that someone was watching from the roof across the street, and the watching had the quality of working something out rather than gathering intelligence, and that I didn't know who yet. She said, "Now I know who." He said, "And?" She said, "And the entry is getting longer." He said, "What direction?" She said, "Toward understanding what you're working out." He said, "You want to understand it?" She said, "I want to understand everything, it's the way I'm built." He said, "Most people who want to understand me want to fix me, or stop me." She said, "I'm not most people." He said, "No." He said, "You're not." She looked at him with those full registration eyes. She said, "Can I ask you something direct?" He said, "Yes." She said, "What are you actually doing? Not the League's goals, not the stated mission. What are you actually doing?" He said, "Burning things." She said, "What things?" He said, "Everything my father built. everything that came from the project he made me for and then discarded me from. She said, endeavor. He said, yes. She said, you're Toya Todoroki. He went completely still. She said, I've known since the library. The burns are specific, the pattern of the scarring, the fire output. I have notebooks about quirk genetics, and the Todoroki family profile has been in my hero analysis since first year. She said, I didn't say anything because it wasn't mine to say. He said, it's still not yours to say. She said, I'm saying it to you, not to anyone else. He said, why? She said, because calling you Dabi to your face when I know who you actually are would be dishonest, and I don't do dishonest. He said, most people. She said, I know what most people do. He said, you keep saying that. She said, because it keeps being relevant. He looked at her. He said, Toya is gone. She said, you're here. He said, I'm Dabi. She said, you're both. The one doesn't erase the other just because you stopped using the name. He said, you can't know that. She said, the library. You watched a first-year student cry over a textbook for 20 minutes. You were there for operational purposes, and you watched someone struggle with something difficult, and you found it significant enough to come back 3 more times to the same person. She said, Toya noticed that. Dabi would have kept walking. He was quiet for a long time. She kept writing. He said, what else does the notebook say? She said, it says the burning is real, the anger is real, the things you're angry about are real things that happen to a real person. She said, and it says the burning is not the same as the building, and you've been burning so long you haven't asked what comes after. He said, the rubble. She looked up. She said, yes, the rubble, you know the question. He said, I've been approaching it from one side. She said, which side? He said, the burning side, what happens when the fire reaches endeavor. She said, and what comes after that? He said, I haven't built the after. She said, no. He said, have you? She said, for the system, yes, I have notebooks about the architecture. What comes after the things that need to change have changed. She said, not specifically for what comes after endeavor, that's your architecture to build. He said, you'd help. She said, I'd help you think about it, the thinking is yours. He said, why would you help? She said, because you came to the park, because the reason you came is real, because the requirement is still being here and you've been here for almost a decade and that means something. He said, it means I survived. She said, it means more than survived. He said, what more? She said, you're still reaching for real things. The library, the street, the steps, the park. You kept coming back to something real even while you were doing the burning. She said, that's not nothing, that's the thing underneath the fire. He said, you see the thing underneath. She said, I always look for the thing underneath. He said, and what is it? She said, someone who was handed a story that was not his, and who has been living in it for 10 years, and who is starting to notice that the story is not the whole thing. He was very quiet. She wrote. He said, the whole thing. She said, yes. He said, what is the whole thing? She said, I don't know yet, that's what the architecture is for. He said, you help me think about the architecture. She said, you help me think about things I can't see from inside the system. The view from outside is different. He said, an exchange. She said, yes. He said, like 2 people with different notebooks comparing what's in them. She said, yes, exactly like that. He said, I don't have notebooks. She said, no, but you have the view from outside. He said, and that's worth something. She said, it's worth a lot. I've been inside the system my whole life. The system's blind spots are invisible to me from inside. You can see them. He said, you'd trust information from a villain. She said, I'd trust accurate information from anyone who had it. The source doesn't change the accuracy. He said, most people. She said, I know. He said, you're going to keep saying that. She said, as long as it keeps being relevant. Something moved in him again. Not fire. The other thing. The thing that happened when the seal got pressure from outside, and he could feel what was on the other side of it. He scratched the back of his neck. She said, Thursday, same bench, I'll bring the notebooks about the architecture. He said, I didn't agree to come back. She said, I know. He said, you think I'll come back? She said, I think you drove across whatever you crossed to get to this park today, and I think the reason you drove across it is still going to be true on Thursday. He looked at her. He said, what reason? She said, you needed to hear something real, and you came to find the person who said a real thing. He said, and on Thursday? She said, on Thursday you'll need it again. He said, you're very certain? She said, I have notebooks about patterns. Patterns don't usually stop at one data point. He stood up. He said, Midoriya. She said, yes. He said, the library, the first time. She said, yes. He said, you were crying. She said, yes. He said, over a textbook. She said, I was stuck on something. The crying was frustration. I get frustrated when I can't understand something correctly. He said, you kept writing. She said, I always keep writing. Getting frustrated doesn't mean stopping. He said, no. He said, it doesn't. He walked away. She watched him go. She wrote in the notebook. She wrote, Toya Todoroki came to the park today, not Dabi, Toya. She wrote, the distinction matters. She drew a star. He came back on Thursday. Obviously. She had 2 notebooks waiting for him and a second piece of bread from the bakery, and she handed him the bread before he sat down, because he had the same posture he had the first day, and the posture said he had not eaten properly. He looked at the bread. He said, you do this. She said, the bakery is on the way, it's not a thing. He said, it is a thing. She said, sit down. He sat down. He ate the bread. She opened the first notebook. The weeks that followed were the architecture weeks. Not the League's architecture, not any plan or operation or strategic direction, the architecture of what came after the burning. She brought the notebooks and he brought the outside view, and they sat on the bench on Thursdays, and they built something that neither of them had a name for, but which was filling up the pages of Notebook 29 in a way that was different from the filling of notebooks before it. She was honest with Aizawa about the exchange. Not all of it, the nature of what was actually happening, the Thursday bench, the bread, the specific texture of 2 people approaching the same questions from opposite directions, that she kept in Notebook 29 because it was hers and his, and the specific nature of it required that it stay in the space where it had grown. But the useful things, the view from outside the system, the specific blind spots she was finding through the exchange, the architecture they were building together towards something better than rubble. Those she gave to Aizawa in the form that was useful. Aizawa received them with the specific quality of someone filing accurate information in the correct location. He said, this source. She said, trustworthy on these specific things. I verify independently where possible. He said, and the rest? She said, is mine. He said, Midoriya. She said, yes. He said, be careful. She said, I'm always careful, that's different from always safe. He said, I know the difference. She said, I know you do. Dabi told Toga the exchange was happening. Not all of it, not the Thursday bench or the bread or Notebook 29. He told her the part that was operationally relevant, that he had a contact inside UA who was providing useful structural analysis. Toga said, a contact. He said, yes. Toga said, what kind of contact? He said, the useful kind. Toga looked at him with the specific liquid attention she brought to things she was trying to understand. She said, you seem different. He said, I'm the same. She said, you're eating breakfast now. He said, I always ate breakfast. Toga said, Compress has been keeping track. You started eating breakfast regularly 6 weeks ago. He said, drop it. She said, there's someone. He said, drop it. She said, I'm not judging, I'm just. He said, Toga. She looked at him. He said, some things are not operational, leave them there. She was quiet. She said, okay. She left it there. He ate breakfast. The moment that cracked something open happened in week 8. She had brought Notebook 17, the one about the Todoroki family analysis, the quirk genetics, the structural critique of Endeavor's training methodology, the specific documentation of what the project had cost in human terms. She had hesitated before bringing it. She had written about the hesitation in Notebook 29. She had written, bringing Notebook 17 means showing him what I've written about the thing that happened to him. That's a specific exposure. He knows I know the outline. He doesn't know I've been writing about the specifics since first year. She had written, the question is whether showing him what I documented serves him, or serves me. She had written, the answer is him. The documentation is accurate, and the accuracy might help him see the thing that happened as something that was done to him, rather than something that was inherent to him. She had written, I'm bringing it. She brought it. She said, I want to show you something, and I want you to know before I show you that what's in here is mine, my analysis, my framework, and it's yours to push back on. He said, what is it? She said, what I've documented about what happened to you, not from the outside, from the inside of understanding how the training methodology worked and what it was designed to produce and what it actually produced. He said, you've been writing about this since first year. She said, since before I knew you were Toya. He said, just from the public record. She said, and the analysis of the Todoroki family quirk genetics, and the training documentation that became public after the sports festival. He said, Shoto. She said, yes. He said, what did Shoto show? She said that the methodology didn't work even in its own terms. The best outcome it produced was someone who refused to use what it built. He was quiet. She said, can I show you? He said, yes. She gave him Notebook 17. He read it. He read it for a long time. She did not watch him read. She looked at the park and wrote in Notebook 29 and let him be alone with it. He finished. He held the notebook in his hands. He did not give it back immediately. He said, you wrote that what happened was a structural failure. She said, yes. He said, not a personal one. She said, yes. He said, what's the difference? She said, a personal failure would mean something inherent to you failed, something you did or didn't do. A structural failure means the system that was supposed to work didn't work because the system was wrong, not because you were. He said, the training methodology was wrong. She said, the training methodology was built around the wrong understanding of how quirk inheritance worked in your case. It was wrong before you arrived in it. He said, I was 7. She said, yes. He said, and it was already wrong before I got there. She said, yes. He was quiet. She wrote. He said, I spent years trying to fix the personal failure. She said, I know. He said, pushing past what my body could hold, showing him it could work. She said, yes. He said, because I thought I was the problem. She said, yes. He said, and if I had just pushed hard enough. She said, the door would have opened. He said, yes. She said, the door was sealed before you got there. The design of the project made the door impossible for you specifically. It wasn't about how hard you pushed. Long silence. She kept writing. He said, that's. He stopped. She said, I know. He said, that's a different story than the one I've been in. She said, yes. He said, everything I've been doing, the burning, the leg, the 10 years. She said, was built on the personal failure story. He said, and if that story is wrong. She said, the burning is the right response to the wrong story. He said, not to the actual thing. She said, the actual thing deserves a different response. He said, what response? She said, that's the architecture. That's what we've been building on Thursdays. He said, we've been building toward this. She said, yes. He said, you knew this was where the architecture led. She said, I had a hypothesis. Thursday 8 is the data. He said, you weren't going to tell me until I was ready to hear it. She said, yes. He said, how did you know when that was? She said, the bread. You started eating it without looking at it like a transaction. 3 weeks ago, that's when I knew. He said, you tracked when I stopped looking at the bread like a transaction. She said, I track things, that's the system. He said, most people. She said, I know. He said, you keep saying that. She said, it keeps being relevant. He said, because you're different from most people. She said, yes. He said, I've been building the burning on a wrong foundation. She said, yes. He said, and the actual foundation. She said is the accurate story, what actually happened, not the personal failure story. The structural failure story where a 7-year-old was placed in a wrong system and burned because the system was wrong. He said and then survived. She said yes. He said and then built 10 years of revenge on the wrong understanding of why he needed to survive in the first place. She said yes. He looked at his hands. She wrote. He said Midoriya. She said yes. He said, what do you do with 10 years built on the wrong story? She said, you don't undo them, you can't, you build forward from the accurate story. He said, which is? She said that something real happened to a real person, and it was wrong and that person survived it, and is here and the here is the starting point. He said, not the revenge. She said, not the revenge, the here. He said, the requirement is just to still be here. She said, yes. Long pause. She said, you said that back to me. He said, you said it to the kid on the steps. I've been thinking about it for 8 weeks. She wrote something in the notebook. He said, what are you writing? She said that you've been sitting with something someone said on a building step for 8 weeks, and you came back because of it, and that's the kind of thing that goes in the star entries. He said, what are star entries? She said, the ones that matter most. He said, I'm in those. She said, you have been for a while. He said, how long? She said, the library, since the beginning. He looked at her. She looked at him. She said, the both things situation. He said, what both things? She said, the weight of what's been done and what you've done is real, both things, and the here is also real, and both of those things are true at the same time and the architecture has to hold both. He said, that sounds impossible. She said, it sounds complicated. He said, what's the difference? She said, impossible means it can't be done. Complicated means it requires more than one notebook. He said, you have 30 notebooks. She said, I have enough. He scratched the back of his neck. He said, I need to tell you something. She said, okay. He said, the league is planning something. I don't have the full shape yet, but the direction is toward UA again and the scale is larger than previous operations. She said, you're telling me. He said, yes. She said, you know what I'll do with that. He said, I know. She said, and? He said, and it's the right thing to do with it. She said, yes. She wrote something. He said, what? She said that the pattern held through week 8. He said, patterns. She said, they don't usually stop at one data point. He said, no. He said, they don't. He looked at the park. He said, the Todoroki family. She said, yes. He said, Shoto doesn't know I'm alive. She said, no. He said, what do you think he'd say? She said, I don't know. I have some analysis, but the emotional territory of that specific conversation is beyond what I can map from outside. He said, what does the analysis say? She said that Shoto has been carrying the weight of the family history since the sports festival in a direction that suggests he's been trying to understand it rather than just survive it. He said he's doing the architecture too. She said in his own way, yes. He said, and my father. She said, Endeavor has been doing something I find hard to classify. The public direction suggests attempted accountability. The private cost of that is unknown. He said, it doesn't fix it. She said, no, accountability doesn't fix it. He said, but. She said, but the architecture accounts for things that can't be fixed. The building forward doesn't require fixing the past. It requires accurate understanding of it. He said, Notebook 17. She said, yes. He said, can I keep it for the week? She said, yes. He picked it up. He stood. He said, Izumi. Her actual name for the first time. She looked up. He said, the star entries. She said, yes. He said, I'd like to know what they say. She said, I'll bring them Thursday. He said, all of them. She said, all of them. He said, okay. He walked away. She watched him go. She wrote for a long time. The last line she wrote that day was, "The architecture is not for the burning. The architecture is for what's on the other side of the burning. We are building the other side." She underlined it. She drew 3 stars. The visible choice happened the same way visible choices always happened. Not announced, not scheduled, as the natural result of everything that had been building toward it. The leg moved. The operation was larger than previous ones. The direction was toward UA. The scale had been expanding in the planning phase for 3 weeks, and Dabi had been feeding Izumi the shape of it as it developed, not complete operational specifics, the parts that were his to give, the parts that would protect people who shouldn't pay the cost. She had given everything to Aizawa as it arrived. The positioning was good. The League hit a wall they hadn't expected. In the confusion of the operation's failure, in the specific chaos of things going wrong at multiple points simultaneously, Dabi did not use his fire the way the plan required. He was supposed to be the cover, the distraction, the wall of blue flame that occupied the hero response while the rest of the operation achieved its objective. He put up the fire. He pointed it at nothing. The League noticed. Shigaraki noticed. After the operation failed and the League regrouped, Shigaraki said nothing for a long time. Then he said, "You pointed the fire at nothing." Dabi said, "Yes." Shigaraki said, "Why?" Dabi said, "Because the operation was wrong." Shigaraki said, "Explain wrong." Dabi said, "The rubble direction, the thing that comes after. We don't have the architecture for what we're building, and the operation would have produced rubble, and rubble is not the goal." Shigaraki said, "The goal is to destroy the current system." Dabi said, "And then what?" Silent. Shigaraki said, "What?" Dabi said, "And then what? What replaces it? What do the people we're supposedly freeing live in after we burn it down? What's the architecture?" Shigaraki said, "That's not the current phase." Dabi said, "There's no phase where it gets planned if we don't plan it." He had been building this argument on Thursdays for months. He had the structure of it. He knew where it was going. He knew what Shigaraki's response would be before it arrived. He also knew that saying it out loud was the visible choice. Shigaraki said, "You've been compromised." Dabi said, "My analysis has been updated with better information. That's different from compromise." Shigaraki said, "Better information from where?" Dabi said, "From the outside view of what the operation would actually produce." He did not say, "From someone I've been meeting in a park on Thursdays for 3 months." He did not need to. Toga already knew. Compress had been keeping track. The League was small, and in small spaces patterns were visible. Shigaraki said, "The contact." Dabi said, "Yes." Shigaraki said, "What kind of contact?" Dabi said, "The kind that provides accurate analysis of what the operations produce from the outside." Shigaraki said, "And in exchange?" Dabi said, "In exchange, the contact gets the view from inside the system's blind spots." Shigaraki said, "That's an exchange that runs both directions." Dabi said, "Yes." Shigaraki said, "You've been providing inside information to a hero contact." He said it flatly, without the dramatic accusation quality. The flat version was worse. Dabi said, "I've been providing information that prevented operations that would have produced rubble and not change." "Yes." Shigaraki looked at him. Dabi looked back. He said the mission was to change the system, not to produce rubble. If the mission has changed to rubble for its own sake, then I'm not operating toward the mission anymore. Shigaraki said, "The mission hasn't changed." Dabi said, "Then the architecture needs to change, and I've been building the architecture on Thursdays." Long silence. He said, "I'm not leaving. I'm not going to the heroes. I'm making the argument that the direction needs to include the after." He said, "But the operations that produce rubble without architecture, I'm not covering those anymore." Shigaraki said, "That's not your call." Dabi said, "I'm making it mine." The League was very quiet. He had been in the League long enough to know what the quality of that quiet meant. It meant the decision was being made about him rather than with him. He had known that was coming when he said it. He had said it anyway. Because some things were worth saying, even when you knew the consequence. Because the architecture required saying the thing out loud, even when it was the visible choice. Because the requirement was to still be here, and here meant honest. He walked out of the bar. He sent her one message. It said the visible choice happened. She wrote back immediately. She said, "Are you safe?" He said, "Unclear, working on it." She said, "Come to the park." He said, "Now." She said, "Now." He went to the park. She was already there. Not with 30 notebooks, with 2, the ones that were most immediately relevant. He sat down. Not at the 2-meter distance, closer. She didn't say anything about the distance. She said, "Tell me." He told her. All of it, the operation and the fire, pointed at nothing, and the conversation with Shigaraki, and the visible choice, and the walking out. She listened to all of it. She said, "You made the argument." He said, "Yes." She said, "The rubble argument." He said, "Yes." She said, "And the response?" He said, "What you'd expect." She said, "But you're still here." He said, "Yes." She said, "Not gone, not turned, still here." He said, "Yes." She said, "That's the choice in the visible choice." He said, "Yes." She said, "What comes next?" He said, "I don't know the full shape yet." She said, "What do you know?" He said that going back to the bar is not the direction, that the architecture we've been building is real, and I want to build it rather than burn it, that I have been in the wrong story for 10 years, and I am done living in that story. He said, "And that I came to the park." She said, "Yes." He said, "Which means something." She said, "Yes, it does." He looked at the notebooks in her hands. He said, "The star entries." She said, "Yes." He said, "You said you'd bring them Thursday." She said, "Today is close enough to Thursday." She handed him notebook 29. He held it. She said that one is specifically about this. He said, "The park." She said, "The park, the bench, the bread, the things that are both real simultaneously." He said, "Me." She said, "Yes." He said, "The star entries." She said, "You're most of them." He looked at the notebook. He said, "Can I?" She said, "Yes, that's why I brought it." He read. She had written, "The requirement is just to still be here, and he has been here for almost a decade after something that should have ended things, and he came to a park because a real thing was said, and he needed real, and that is the thing underneath the fire. That is the reaching for something real that has been happening across the library and the street and the steps and the park, and it is in the star entries because it matters more than the analysis. It is the thing the analysis is pointing toward." He read, "The pen speed is different when I write about this. Slower, the processing speed rather than the analysis speed, because this is in the category that doesn't have a framework yet, and the thing without a framework requires the slower pen." He read, "He noticed the bread was not a transaction. He noticed I noticed. We are both noticing the same thing from different angles, and the thing we are both noticing is real." He read the last entry. She had written it that morning. She had written, "He is going to make the visible choice today or very soon. The pattern has been building toward it for weeks, and the visible choice is going to cost him in the ways visible choices cost people, and I am going to be in the park when he needs to be somewhere after the cost." She had written, "That's where I'll be." She had written, "That's where I always am on Thursdays." She had written, "And some things matter more than Thursday." He closed the notebook. He held it. He said, "Izumi." She said, "Yes." He said, "The both things." She said, "Yes." He said, "The weight of what I've done is real." She said, "Yes." He said, "And?" She said, "And the here is also real." He said, "And I came to the park." She said, "Yes." He said, "And you were already here." She said, "Yes." He said, "That's in the star entries." She said, "Yes." He said, "What does the star mean?" She said that it matters, that it goes in the permanent record, that I don't cross it out. He said, "You don't cross it out." She said, "No." He said, "Even with the complicated." She said, "Especially with the complicated. The uncomfortable things are the ones that most deserve the star." He looked at the park. He looked at his hands. The burns and the stitches, the 10 years of fire, the visible choice and what came after it. He said, "The architecture." She said, "Yes." He said, "We've been building it for months." She said, "Yes." He said, I want to keep building it. She said, I know. He said, even with what it costs. She said, yes. He said, you're not going to tell me it's simple. She said, it's the most complicated thing available. That's exactly why it's the right direction. He said, Notebook 29 said some things matter more than Thursday. She said, yes. He said, this matters more than Thursday. She said, yes. He said, so. She said, so we build. She opened Notebook 30. She started writing. He watched her write. He said, the pen's speed. She said, yes. He said, which one? She said, both at the same time. He said, that's possible. She said, apparently. He said, what are you writing? She said that the visible choice happened and the direction is the park, and the architecture is real and we are building from here. She said, and that the requirement is to still be here. She said, and we both are. She said, that's the whole entry, that's everything. She underlined it. She drew 3 stars. He looked at the 3 stars. He said, 3. She said, yes. He said, why 3? She said, 1 for each thing that's true. The cost is real, the here is real, the building is real. He said, all 3 at once. She said, yes, all 3 at once. He sat in the park with Notebook 29 in his hands and the 3 stars in Notebook 30, and the afternoon doing what afternoons did when something significant had been decided in them. She kept writing. He said, Izumi. She said, yes. He said, the bread. She said, yes. He said, next Thursday. She said, yes. He said, I'll be here. She said, I know. He said, how do you know? She said, patterns. He said, they don't stop at one data point. She said, no. He said, they don't. The park held them. The city hummed. The notebooks filled. The architecture continued. The week after the visible choice was the hardest week. Not because of the League. The League's response was what it was, the specific cold silence of an organization that had been running on a particular dynamic and had encountered someone stepping outside that dynamic. He had expected it. He had written nothing down about it, but he had been in the League long enough to know how it responded to people who stopped being useful in the expected way. The hard part was not the League. The hard part was the morning. He had been operating on the League's schedule for years, the bar's hours, the operational tempo, the specific rhythm of a life organized around a mission that he had now publicly stepped sideways from. Without that rhythm, mornings were very quiet. He was not used to quiet. He sat in a place that was not the bar, a small room he had kept separately for years, one of several, because Dabi had always maintained the specific operational caution of someone who understood that depending on one location was a vulnerability, and he sat in the quiet and he thought. He thought about 10 years. 10 years was a long time to run on one story. He had written nothing down, but the thinking was the equivalent, the slow processing of what it meant to have been in a specific direction for a decade, and to have turned sideways, and to be sitting in the morning, quiet understanding that sideways was not the same as knowing where you were going next. He thought about the architecture. He and Izumi had been building something on Thursdays, pages of it, the structural analysis, the what comes after directions, the both things simultaneously framework. It was real. It existed in 30 notebooks. But notebooks were not a plan. And he did not have a plan. He sat with not having a plan. It was deeply uncomfortable. He was used to fire. Fire was a plan. Fire was always doing something, always moving, always producing an effect you could see and measure. The morning quiet produced nothing visible. He sat in it anyway. He thought, this is probably what the building feels like from the inside, before it becomes visible. The structural work happens before you can see the structure. He thought she would write that down. He thought, I should tell her that on Thursday. He thought about Thursday. The thought of Thursday was, he noticed, the clearest and most specific feeling in the morning quiet. He sat with that too. She was already on the bench when Thursday arrived. 2 notebooks, the bread from the bakery, the pen moving at the analysis speed which he had learned to read, as she is thinking through something she hasn't fully resolved yet. He sat down. closer than the original 2 meters. He had stopped maintaining the original distance around week 5, without either of them saying anything about the change. She said, "You're here." He said, "I said I would be." She said, "Yes." She handed him the bread. He took it. He said, "How did Aizawa respond?" She said, "To the week's intelligence." He said, "Yes." She said, with the specific Aizawa response that communicates accurate reception without revealing what's being done with the information. He said, "So you don't know?" She said, "I know that people who should be protected are protected. That's what I know." He said, "That's enough." She said, "Yes." She kept writing. He ate the bread. He said, "The morning quiet." She looked up. He said, after the visible choice, "The mornings are different." She said, "Tell me." He said, "I've been running on a schedule for 10 years. The league's schedule, the operational tempo, and now the mornings are quiet and I'm not used to quiet." She said, "What does quiet feel like?" He said, "Like standing in a building when the fire goes out. All the structure is still there, but the thing that was filling it is gone, and the space is very large suddenly." She wrote something. He said, "What are you writing?" She said, "Exactly what you just said, because that's the most accurate description of post-mission identity shift I've heard, and I want it in the record." He said, "Post-mission identity shift." She said, "When the mission that has been organizing your experience of yourself is no longer the organizing thing, the space that was filled with it becomes visible." He said, "And it's large." She said, "Yes, it's always larger than expected." He said, "Have you experienced it?" She said, "When I found out I was quirkless, the mission of becoming a hero had been organizing everything since I was 4. The confirmation was supposed to close that. The space that opened was very large." He said, "But you kept going." She said, "I kept writing, which is what I do with large spaces." He said, "You fill them with documentation." She said, with understanding, "Yes." He said, "I don't have notebooks." She said, "No, but you have the morning quiet, and you came to Thursday." He said, "Yes." She said, "Those are the equivalent." He said, "Sitting in the quiet and coming to the bench." She said, "The showing up is the system, whatever form the showing up takes." He said, "I showed up." She said, "Yes, you did." He scratched the back of his neck. He said, "There's something I need to tell you." She put the pen down. She said, "Okay." He said, "Shigaraki," the response to the visible choice, it wasn't just silence. She said, "Tell me." He said, "There's a faction, within the league, that's been tracking the exchange more closely than I told you. Toga, Compress, they've known since early in the process that the contact was UA." She said, "How much do they know?" He said, "The operational substance, what I've been passing, not the Thursday bench, not the bread, not notebook 29, but the shape of the exchange, that it runs both directions, that it's been producing information that has changed operational outcomes." She said, "And Shigaraki's response to that?" He said, "Is still forming. That's what makes it complicated. He hasn't moved yet, he's thinking." She said, "Shigaraki thinking is more dangerous than Shigaraki acting." He said, "Yes, because when he acts it's already decided." She said, "How much time?" He said, "I don't know, a week, maybe 2, before the thinking produces a direction." She said, "I need to give Aizawa this." He said, "I know." She said, "You knew when you told me." He said, "Yes." She said, "And you told me anyway." He said, "Yes." She said, "Because it was right." He said, "Because it was right, and because you should have accurate information, and because." He stopped. She said, "Because." He said, "Because some things matter more than the operational." She said, "Yes." She picked up the pen. She wrote for a moment. He said, "What are you writing?" She said, "That you keep giving me information that you know I'll use, and the reason you keep doing it is the same reason every time." He said, "What reason?" She said, "That the right thing and the thing that protects what's real are the same thing in your case, and you figured that out." He said, "In my case." She said, "In the case of someone who came to a park because a real thing was said, and has been coming back because real things kept being said." He said, "The pattern." She said, "Yes." He was quiet. He said, the Todoroki family. She looked up. He said, Shoto specifically. She said, yes. He said, the analysis. You said he's been doing the architecture in his own way. She said, yes. He said, what does that look like from where you sit? She said, it looks like someone who has been trying to understand the history rather than just carry it, who has been separating what belongs to him from what was put on him. He said, same project as me, different angle. She said, yes. He said, is there any? She said, I don't know what he would say to knowing you're alive. I told you that. He said, you said you had some analysis. She said, I said the emotional territory was beyond what I could map from outside. He said, but the analysis. She said, the analysis says he would want to know that operating without accurate information about his family is the specific thing that makes the architecture harder for him. He said, I'm accurate information about his family. She said, yes, the most significant piece of it. He said, what you're saying is. She said, I'm not saying anything. You're asking what the analysis says. The analysis says the accurate picture requires you in it. He was quiet for a long time. She wrote. He said, when? She said, that's yours to decide, not mine. He said, but you have a hypothesis. She said, I always have a hypothesis. He said, tell me. She said, when you're ready, not when it's strategic, not when it serves the architecture, when you're ready. He said, how will I know? She said, the pen speed question. When thinking about it feels different from how it has been feeling. He said, and how has it been feeling? She said, like pressure, like something that has to be managed. He said, and when I'm ready? She said, it'll feel like something you want rather than something that needs managing. He said, that's a subtle difference. She said, subtle differences are where the real information usually lives. He looked at the city. He said, my mother. She said, yes. He said, she's at the hospital. She said, yes. He said, that's in the public record now. She said, yes. He said, and my father is. She said, attempting something. What it actually is remains to be seen. He said, the analysis. She said, the analysis says attempted accountability without the full picture is incomplete accountability, and the full picture requires things Endeavor hasn't faced yet. He said, me. She said, you, yes. He said, I'm the part of the full picture he hasn't faced. She said, yes. He said, that's a significant amount of picture. She said, yes, it is. He scratched the back of his neck. He said, if I went. She said, when you go. He said, you think I will? She said, patterns. He said, they don't stop at one data point. She said, no, they don't. He said, and you think this is the direction? She said, I think the architecture we've been building points here. The part about building while preserving what's worth preserving. The part about what comes after the burning. He said, Shoto is worth preserving. She said, yes. He said, even now, even with. She said, especially now. He said, you keep saying especially. She said, because the especially is always accurate. He said, for the hard things. She said, for the real things that are also hard, yes. He looked at the notebook in her hands. He said, what section are we in now? She said, the part I'm calling the after. He said, the building after the burning. She said, yes. He said, and where are we in it? She said, near the beginning, the foundation work, the part where you figure out what the structure is before you build the walls. He said, and the foundation. She said, is the accurate story. Notebook 17, the structural failure, not the personal one, the 7-year-old in the wrong system. He said, and standing up from that. She said, and standing up from that, yes. He said, and what comes after standing up? She said, the Todoroki question. The honest conversation with someone who has been carrying the same history from a different angle. He said, Shoto. She said, yes. He said, and after that? She said, the Endeavor question, which is harder and slower and I don't have a full map for it yet. He said, you don't have a map for it? She said, no, I have directions but not a map. He said, that's honest. She said, I try to be accurate about the edges of what I know. He said, most people. She said, I know. He said, you keep. She said, I know. They both almost smiled at the same time. Not quite close. She wrote something. He said, what? She said that we almost smiled at the same time. That's in the record now. He said, you documented that. She said, the star entries document everything that matters. He said, and that matters. She said, yes, it does. He looked at the notebook. He said, can I ask you something? She said, yes. He said, the exchange, the months of it, the Thursdays. She said, yes. He said, what is it for you? She said, what do you mean? He said, I know what I come for. I told you. I needed real and you said real things and I kept coming back. He said, but what is it for you? You're a hero, student. I'm not a simple situation for you. The complications are significant and you know all of them. She said, yes. He said, and you keep coming to Thursday anyway. She said, yes. He said, so what is it? She put the pen down. She looked at him. She said, you know what it is. He said, I want you to say it. She said, the same thing it is for you. I come because real things get said here. Because the view from outside, the system is accurate in ways I can't access from inside. Because the exchange produces things I don't get anywhere else. She said, and because of what's in notebook 29. He said, say it directly. She said, because you matter, specifically, not the analysis, not the architecture, you. He said, even with everything. She said, because of everything, all of it together. The fire and the stitches and the 10 years and the wrong story and the bread and the park and page 47 and the morning quiet and the visible choice. She said, all of it is the person. The person is what matters. He was very still. She said, I don't do things halfway. The notebooks are 31 now. Every one of them is complete. This is the same. He said, complete. She said, yes. He said, even with the Shigaraki timeline, even with the complicated. She said, especially. He said, yes. He said, I know. He looked at the notebook. He said, the almost smile. She said, yes. He said, document that we got closer this time. She picked up the pen. She wrote, closer this time. She drew a star next to it. He watched her draw it. He said, 3 stars. She said 3 things true simultaneously. The complicated is real, the here is real, this is real. He said, all 3 at once. She said, all 3. He scratched the back of his neck. He said, Izumi. She said, yes. He said, next Thursday. She said, yes. He said, bring the directions for the Shoto conversation. She said, you're ready for that section. He said, not yet, but I want to be looking at the map before I'm ready, so when ready comes it's not unfamiliar. She said, that's good preparation. He said, I learned from someone who documents everything. She said, the system works. He said, yes. He said, it does. She looked at him. He looked at her. The park held the specific afternoon quality of something that was building at the correct pace. Not too fast, not forced. The pace that was right for the actual structure being built. She opened notebook 31. She wrote at the top of a new section, the Shoto directions. She wrote, starting here. She wrote because he asked. She looked at the 3 words. She kept them. 3 weeks later, Aizawa called her in again. She had been expecting it. She sat across from him and she waited. He said, the situation has developed. She said, Shigaraki. He said, yes, the Commission has received intelligence suggesting the League is fragmenting around a disagreement about operational direction. There are 2 camps. She said, I know. He said, you know because your source is one of the reasons for the fragmentation. She said, yes. He said, the Commission wants to move on this. The fragmentation is an opportunity. She said, move how? He said, bring the source in, formally, under the Commission's framework. She said, that's not the right approach. He said, I know. She said, the commission's framework would. He said, I know, I told them. I'm telling you so you understand what I'm managing on my end. She said, what did you tell them? He said that the source's value is specifically in not being inside the commission's framework, that the exchange produces what it produces because both sides are outside institutional structures, that bringing it inside would end what makes it work. She said they accepted that. He said, reluctantly, with conditions. She said, what conditions? He said that if the League's fragmentation produces a direct threat, the Commission has authority to engage regardless of the exchange. She said, that's reasonable. He said, I thought you'd say that. She said, is there a direct threat forming? He said, Shigaraki's thinking is producing a direction, we don't know what yet. She said, I might know before you. He said, yes, that's what I'm counting on. She said, Aizawa. He said, yes. She said, when the direction becomes clear, whatever it is, I'll give you everything I have as fast as I have it. He said, I know. He said, be careful. She said, I know the difference between careful and safe. He said, I know you do. She said, thank you for managing the commission conversation. He said, that's the job. She said, it's more than the job. He said, yes, but we're not talking about that. She said, no. She went back to class. She wrote 4 pages in notebook 31 on the way. Thursday came and the bread was from the bakery, and she had 3 notebooks instead of 2. He sat down. He looked at the 3 notebooks. He said, the Shoto directions. She said, yes, and 2 others. He said, what are the 2 others? She said, the Shigaraki timeline and what I know about the direction. He said, you have new information. She said, Aizawa called me in. The commission knows the League is fragmenting. They want to move on it. He said, Aizawa is managing them. She said, yes, but the management has conditions. If a direct threat forms, the commission has authority to engage. He said, meaning me. She said, you're not a direct threat. He said, to them I am. She said, you walked out of the bar. You haven't activated the fire since the visible choice operation. You've been providing intelligence that has protected people. He said, that's not how the commission sees it. She said, it's how Aizawa sees it, and right now Aizawa is the relevant person. He said, for now. She said, for now, yes. He said, and when the for now changes. She said, we build fast enough that the picture changes before the commission's picture catches up. He said, the architecture. She said, yes, the faster we build the more the situation looks different from what they're currently assessing it as. He said, what does faster look like? She said, the Shoto conversation. He said, yes. She said, it changes the picture significantly. The Todoroki family situation moving toward resolution changes what the commission sees when they look at the fragmentation. He said, from threat to something else. She said, from threat to someone who is navigating something complicated in the direction of accuracy. He said, is that enough for the commission? She said, it's enough for Aizawa, and Aizawa is enough for now. He said, you trust him? She said, completely, he's on the load-bearing list. He said, the load-bearing list. She said, the people who can hold the weight of accurate information without it changing what the information is. He said, you have a list. She said, of course I have a list. He said, and I'm. She said, you've been on it since week 3. He said, week 3. She said, the week you explained the outside view of the first 2 operations' failures. The analysis was accurate enough to be independently verifiable. Accurate information from someone who could have used it differently, but didn't is load-bearing. He said, because I could have used it differently. She said, yes, the choice not to use it a different way is the thing that makes it load-bearing. He scratched his neck. He said, the Shoto directions. She handed him the notebook. He held it. He said, you wrote this for me. She said, I wrote it for the situation. You're the one navigating the situation. He said, but you were thinking about me when you wrote it. She said, I'm always thinking about the person when I write directions for them. The directions are specific. generic directions are less useful. He said, so this is specific to me. She said, yes. He said, what does specific to me mean for this? She said, it means the directions account for the fact that you haven't spoken to Shoto in almost 10 years, that he thinks you're dead, that the conversation is going to require him to rebuild an entire section of his understanding of the past decade. She said, it accounts for the fact that you are going to want to say things in the first 30 seconds that should wait for later. The first 30 seconds should just be, I'm alive, everything else can come after that lands. He said, just I'm alive. She said, let that be the first thing, let him process it, don't add to it until it's processed. He said, how do I know when it's processed? She said, he'll ask something. It might not be a logical question, it might be very small, but when he asks something it means he's present with it enough to want information rather than just absorbing the shock. He said, and then? She said, then you answer what he asks, not more, just what he asks. He said, not the full explanation. She said, the full explanation comes in pieces, people can only hold so much at once, especially when the thing arriving is something they've been without for 10 years. He said, you've thought about this a lot. She said, I've been thinking about it since week 3, when I decided the architecture pointed here. He said, you've been building toward this conversation since week 3. She said, yes. He said, and you didn't push. She said, it wasn't ready. He said, and now it is. She said, you asked for the map before you were ready so it wouldn't be unfamiliar when ready came. He said, yes. She said, that's how I knew. He said, the map request. She said, yes. He said, because. She said, because people who aren't ready don't ask for the map. They either avoid the territory or they're looking for the exit. You asked for the map, that means you're planning to go. He said, yes. He said, I am. He opened the notebook. He read it slowly. She watched him read the same way she always watched him read, without watching directly, the peripheral attention of someone who was present without imposing. He read for a long time. He closed it. He said, you wrote that the first 30 seconds are for him. She said, yes. He said, not for me. She said, the whole conversation is going to be hard for you, but the first 30 seconds aren't about your experience of it. They're about giving him the space to have his. He said, I've been thinking about what I want to say for 10 years. She said, I know. He said, and none of it goes in the first 30 seconds. She said, not the first 30, no. He said, that's hard. She said, yes. He said, but it's right. She said, yes, it is. He said, you always tell me when something is hard and also right. She said, because you can tell the difference. Most people need you to choose one or the other, you can hold both. He said, the both things. She said, yes. He said, I've been learning that from you. She said, you already knew it, you just needed the framework. He said, the notebooks. She said, the notebooks are the framework, the knowing was yours. He looked at the park. He looked at the city. He said, when? She said, when you're ready. He said, the pen speed question. She said, when it feels like something you want rather than something to manage. He said, and now? She said, what does it feel like now? He was quiet. He said, somewhere between. She said, they're not yet, but soon. He said, yes. He said, soon. He looked at the notebook in his hands. He said, can I keep this one too? She said, yes. He said, I've kept notebook 17 for 3 weeks. She said, I know, you can keep this one too. He said, you trust me with them. She said, the notebooks have your information in them. It's accurate. You should have access to accurate information about yourself. He said, that's why you wrote them. She said, partly. The other part is that having something real to hold is useful when the morning quiet is very large. He said, you thought about the morning quiet. She said, yes. He said, when you wrote it. She said, yes. He said, so it was for me. She said, yes, it was for you. He held both notebooks. He said, the both things. She said, yes. He said, the weight is real. She said, yes. He said, and the building is real. She said, yes. He said, and this. She said, yes, this too. He said, all three at once. She said, all three. The park was warm in the afternoon. The city made its sounds. She opened notebook 31 and wrote the new entries. He sat beside her with 2 notebooks in his hands, and the morning quiet becoming something different than it had been, and the architecture continuing to take shape in the way that real structures took shape, slowly, with the work invisible until suddenly it wasn't. He said, Izumi. She said, yes. He said, the almost smile. She said, yes. He said, I think today. She said, yes. She looked at him. He looked at her. The smile arrived. Not a big thing, not the dramatic version. The specific small real version that happened when something was exactly what it was and didn't need to be more than that. Both of them. At the same time. She picked up the pen. She wrote the smile, not almost, the actual one, both at once. She drew 3 stars. He watched her draw them. He said 3. She said, the weight is real, the building is real, this is real. He said, all 3. She said, all 3. He said, write it down. She said, I did. He said, with 3 stars. She said, yes. He said, good. He sat back. He looked at the notebooks. He said, soon. She said, soon. He said, the Shoto conversation. She said, yes. He said, and then. She said, and then the architecture has walls. He said, and then after that. She said, we find out, we build it and we find out. He said, together. She said, yes. He said, that's in the record now. She said, it's been in the record since week 3. He said, you put it in that early. She said, the pattern was clear that early. He said, what did the week 3 entry say? She said that the exchange was running both directions with consistent honesty, that the direction it was pointing was real, that some things were worth the complicated. He said, and the star? She said, yes, the star was already there. He said, in week 3. She said, yes. He said, before I knew. She said, you knew, you just didn't have the framework yet. He said, the notebooks are the framework. She said, yes. He said, and I came to Thursday. She said, yes. He said, and that's the whole thing. She said, that's the whole thing. She closed notebook 31. She opened 32. She wrote at the top, the walls. She wrote under it, building from here. She wrote under that, together. She looked at the 3 lines. She kept all 3. She looked at him. He looked at her. The park held the afternoon. The city breathed. The notebooks filled. The architecture built itself wall by wall the way real things built themselves, with work and time and the showing up and the both things held simultaneously, and the 3 stars and the real smile, and the morning quiet becoming less quiet and the direction being forward. Always forward. With all 32 notebooks. And whatever came after 32. And that is the complete story of Toya Todoroki, who became Dabi, and who sat on a bench on Thursdays and was handed bread that was not a transaction and read 17 notebooks, and said the rubble argument out loud and walked out of the bar and came to the park. Who found the wrong story was the foundation. Who chose to build on a different one. Who smiled at the same time as someone else on an afternoon in a park with 32 notebooks and the architecture still going and the walls beginning. Who is still here. The requirement was to still be here. He met it. Every Thursday. No cap, this is one of the most honest and complete stories we have ever told on Fiction Flux. And 32 notebooks proved it. Every single one. If you made it to the very end of this complete story, you are absolutely Fiction Flux family, and we see you completely. Please subscribe and hit that like button and share this video with every anime fan you know, because every single share helps us grow and reach more people who love stories like this. It genuinely means everything to us. Drop in the comments what story you want next, because we make these for you. See you in the next one.